What job should marketing get done in a company?
I think that marketing is all about storytelling. So I think the job of marketing is to tell the story. There are a lot of different ways to do that. And there are so many different types of marketing that do that in different ways. Like advertising is different than content, is different than brand, is different than, organic content is different than paid media. Like there's so many different types of marketing for a reason. And I think that's because storytelling takes a lot of different forms. And it's not always about selling your product, right? Like now I'm in brand, but I used to be in content, and content is a slow burn, especially in B2B. So my thought wasn't always like, how does this impact pipeline? Like sure, that's in the back of my head sometimes, but sometimes it's just as important to get your story out and just to figure out how are you messaging people? Who is the audience? Like how do I put them at the center of everything? And so for me, the point of marketing is storytelling.
That's Shivani Persad. She's an events and brand marketing manager at Gymdesk. Gymdesk is a gym management platform that helps gyms and studios run memberships, billing, scheduling, and audience tracking in one system. Shivani spent a decade as a full-time fashion model before moving into journalism and then into content and brand marketing. In this episode, we talk about why marketing is storytelling, the do's and don'ts of storytelling, and why failure is feedback. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and before we get to it, run the intro. Welcome to On Marketing, a show to help you think more strategically about marketing and life. I won't tell you what to think, I'll help you improve how you think. I'm Jordan Ogren, a marketing strategist with 9 years of experience and a podcast host for the last 4. This episode was originally recorded on December 11th, 2025. All views shared are the individual views of the host and guests, not those of their employers or associate organizations. This show is for informational purposes, not professional advice. Thank you for being here. And what does storytelling do, or what is the outcome that comes from doing storytelling well in all of those platforms, all those places you talk about? What's kind of the second order effect from that?
To figure out if your brand has a place in this person's life or not. So even in B2B, when I think about it, when I started working in tech like 5 years ago, I still realized at the end of the day, no matter what type of tech company I was working for, you're still selling to a person at the end of the day. And so whether it's an HR tech software or a retail tech software or whatever, the point of that software is to make that person's life easier, right? And so that is really where I put myself as a marketer. As a content marketer, it's a little easier to put yourself in that place because your content is supposed to always be helpful, resourceful. It could be very educational, right? Like that is help customer first all the time. Um so I think it's a little easier to put yourself in that seat of like my job is to make someone's life easier, but I still think that that's how it fits in at the end of the day. Even if you're using a software, we're all trying to solve problems with all this tech, right? So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, this story enables easier identification with that brand, that service, that product, to see myself using it, making progress with it, versus features, just hitting them with a list of things of why they should buy from you. Telling the story allows for a doorway into that versus kind of just trying to sell. That makes a lot of sense. And historically, right, the Bible isn't composed of a bunch of bullet points. It's a story, and the stories have larger takeaways that then can, to your point, can be of service and help people live better. And a little different with content or with marketing, but you're still trying to do that. Tell a story. That person sees himself in the story. When you think of storytelling, you talked about don't sell or some of those things that like instantly come to my mind of like no-nos, but what is like a model or maybe like a framework you use to just tell good stories, or how do you tell good stories? And maybe you want to inverse that with like what makes a story bad, and then why does that happen, and then how can we maybe tell better stories?
I think if you're thinking about B2B marketing or really even B2C marketing, the best way to know, I just thought my cat was walking in, he's not. The best way to know how to tell your story, because it's going to be different for everybody, and where I do feel like there are frameworks that you can kind of repeat. The most important thing for me to know is like, how does your customer consume that? What do they want to hear? What's going to be helpful to them? Depending on the type of product that it is, how are you reaching them? Like I do try to think very like distribution first, because if your story is so great but nobody's seeing it, then like that's not the right approach, right? So I think the right
Makes
approach
sense.
is like, where is your customer, and like what kind of story are they like looking to be told? And so much of that is like like looking at customer interviews and talking to the customer success team and what are the pain points that the sales team sees coming up, and then that is where I like to like from a content standpoint, that is where I like to build from a brand standpoint. It's a little different because it's less about the direct like here's how we help you all the time, and it's more about just like presenting yourself as an option and saying like, if I go to this event, how do we strategically show up so to really like organically be in the community and say like if you need this type of software at some point, just know that we're an option and we would love to be top of mind for you. I think that is how I go about it. That's how the gears start turning in my head. In terms of what makes it a bad story or what's bad storytelling? For me, if you start with selling first, like you've already lost me. Like I think that is just tacky and gross and we don't need that in marketing. We're not in sales and even in sales, they don't start with selling first anyways. So I think the best way to figure out how you're gonna tell that story is just to know as much about your customer as possible and like learn what they want, what they not what they want to be told, but learn like where they are in their journey that like your story would help them and what parts of your story would help them. Yeah, how do they fit? Where are they really living it right now and how does it all fit?
I really like the 2 points, the distribution first, which I want to touch on, but that kind of piece of maybe aligning your story with the story that's already going on in their head, or as they would say, the conversation, joining the conversation verse, which maybe advertisement is interrupting that to say, listen to what I have to say, where content and some of these other plays can merely, if you're understanding them well enough, can continue that conversation so it doesn't feel like you're selling because it's like, oh, I was already thinking that in my head of marketers. So Emily Kramer, for example, with like M marketing, yeah, like she speaks to this generalist thought or convo that I've had in my head of like, oh, AI is actually making the generalist far more stronger. But there's a whole side of it too that someone's having the conversation alternatively of like actually the specialist. So then they follow someone who's telling a story that aligns with a specialist will win the future game. And I align with Emily who says the generalist because I'm incentivized to believe her. So I really think that's important. But I love your distribution first because if you cut the tree down in the woods and no one hears it, or if a tree falls in the
Right.
woods, like how do you kind of talked about it's going to be different every time. Do you have like any go-to thinking or actions around how to actually make distribution first like a real thing of like how do you actually, is it, where are those people spending time? Talk me through just a little bit. You've already kind of alluded to it, but I'd love to hear, just go deeper on like distribution first, how you think through that.
For every company I've worked at, it's been so different. Like for some of them, it has been events as well, which is why my new role at Gymdesk is like me really being in events and really um, figuring out how the brand can organically show up as a helpful resource for our customers. But even when I worked in GovTech, like one of the main ways they connected with customers was through either webinars or literally in-person events for these like regulatory agencies that we were selling to. And so that really helped us be very much organically boots on the ground. And I think that is coming to light more and more and more now as we see with like even consumer behavior. They are so much more into these IRL type experiences now too. And so it really depends whether it's B2B or B2C. My world really on my marketing side is very B2B obviously. So I really think about that like this person that will be buying and using the software is behind a computer somewhere. Is that where they're going to see my content and my information and my on the brand, or is there somewhere else that they are spending time that I can reach them? My go-to thing is figuring that out. And normally, as I've said, unless you're coming into a company on the from the ground up, you can talk to sales reps and customer success, and they will know where those people are and what they're doing and where they spend the majority of their time, and when they're in a place to like receive the brand.
That makes a lot of sense. I think there's definitely trends to your point of the pandemic maybe making in real life more of a importance, or but for certain companies or other companies, yeah, I think it's closest to the customer wins. I think I've heard that quote, and I think that kind of parlays into this, that if you're really close to them, you know where they're at and how they want to receive stuff. Is it a webinar or is it more of a dinner-esque where there's exclusive
Exactly.
vibe? And yeah, no, I love that a lot. And then I also think there's another side to the distribution first thought, is that you don't think about like putting one main thing out there, but you're also thinking through of all the micro bits and all the other
Yeah.
things. Talk to me a bit about that, because I think in the social world you do that well, and I think it's something that like you kind of have to do well nowadays, kind of being able to think of like where will this all go and how do we make one thing become quote unquote infinitely distributed? How do you think about that other side of that coin of distributing, thinking through just how all the different ways you can cut up stuff and split content?
When I was on the content side, I would think about distribution before anything else. So if I can't use a piece of content in multiple ways, I probably wouldn't be creating it, you know? And so yeah, like if it's a blog post or a white paper or whatever, I would make sure like, is there an opportunity for it to be mentioned in a podcast, for it to be used as a downloadable asset on a webinar, for it to be broken down into these small little social media videos, or to be broken down into little like text-based things for Instagram or something. And so I always think about that first. And again, I always would say like just focus on like two channels. Like that's really where you should be at, so you don't have to rethink, like reinvent the wheel every time. But it really depends, because speaking of these micro moments, when I was in GovTech, one of the things we realized is like a lot of these people are not really online that much. And so one of the best ways we could reach them was by sending like personalized thank you notes to their offices. So things like that, right? Or even now at Gymdesk, like if you go on Gymdesk's brand, like brand channels, you can see that they're really heavily leaning into martial arts gyms right now. And so we've been thinking like, where are these gym owners? Like they're probably going to be at tournaments. Like they're probably going to be at all these other types of events. So then how do I activate the brand in those events? Like you said, is it a dinner? Is it like, let's sponsor a coffee? Is it like an open mat? What is it? Like, what are we doing? And so we're in the process of like figuring that out right now. And so all of those little things are micro moments too.
No, I love that. And I think one of my questions, which you kind of answered, was like, what gets in the way of distribution first thinking? And I think it is maybe the traditional, or just like being stuck in the old way, or having a playbook. So you're not able to nuance or lean into the nuance of that audience. So then it might be, because I think a lot of times too, at least I'm from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a bit behind the times, quote unquote. So you see like things will go to newspapers first before they hit digital. I'm like, that is not distribution first in my mind, where I would go first digital and then hit the newspaper, like almost duplicate it. So it's like tradition or some of those boxes. Does anything come to your mind of what gets in the way of this distribution thinking on either side of the coin? Is it just maybe the things at which like are thinking habits of where we want to best reach customers, or what gets in the way of someone adapting this mindset?
First of all, let me just say I've spent a weird amount of time in Wisconsin, because I used to model for Bonton and Kohl's. And so I've spent a lot of time in like Milwaukee and Madison. And so I'm no stranger to Wisconsin. Like I had a hot yoga place in Wisconsin. Okay. So yes,
I
I've lived
love it.
many lives, Jordan. But I really like Wisconsin. Yeah, I think one way, and I mean, even one way for me, even like it still happens to me all the time, is like I'm just very like bright eyed, and I have tons of ideas all the time. And so sometimes when the ideas come to you first, you're like not thinking about where it's going. You're just really excited about the idea, and so I always try to think it through. Like, and as you've said, sometimes it's not helpful to have a framework, because sometimes you just have to work through it depending on the situation. But I think you can always have like a loose set of guidelines kind of thing, and I think that can go a really long way. That's what I try to do. Like I try to think, okay, if I'm going to have all these ideas, I have a Notion page for it, I'm just going to dump it all in there. And then when we need something, I can go back to those ideas and then see, okay, can I have a distribution first mindset with this idea? And if I can't, if it's too small of an idea, then probably that's not a good way to approach it. um and now even with brand, thinking of brand before content, it's the same thing in terms of like, let's say I'm thinking about activating in an event. I'm thinking about, other than just being here IRL at this event, what else can we get out of this event? Like I'm thinking about ROI in terms of like gathering SQLs. I'm thinking about like, are we doing, are our AEs having meetings with prospective clients here, and how can I facilitate that through the brand? Is it a dinner that we're doing with particular people? Is it all this like cold outreach to, prospective customers that we know are going to be at this event? Like there's so many levers you can pull. And so now as a brand marketer, I have to figure out, it's kind of like you're zooming out even more. It's like weird because you're zooming out more, but you're also thinking smaller because you're thinking these one-to-one interactions a little bit more. Whereas for content, you're thinking about all these different pieces of content, but you're thinking about reaching a broad audience if you can. So it's kind of like it's flipped now for me as a brand marketer. Yeah.
Very interesting, the interplays of brand and marketing, and how kind of you might just take a different way in or a different way out when you're on brand or marketing. That really makes sense. And I do like your idea of the idea, no pun intended, of how you can get excited with an idea. And I've heard there's this animals agency who does a lot of written content, and they talked about a while ago an idea farm. And I don't know a ton of like, I didn't read that article to like the end, but it hit me of like that makes so much sense because ideas off first rip, and I actually had a recent post about this, like most ideas suck, and I think it's a hard thing for us to kind of come by that. But like the idea grows through friction, or if you think of like the garden, it grows through watering and kind of having things taken off it. And if you just run with an idea, rarely will it be the best version of that idea instantly. So I think there's almost like there's ways in which to pause that, but I also think like if you're someone like that, you probably even need idea farm even more, whether that's in your notes app, Notion, or something. I think that's a huge
Totally.
unlock. So I love that you note that, so I didn't have to be the one to say it, but kind of piggyback off it, because it's so important to kind of being able to think through where does this go, how does it go, if you have time and space, which the idea farm or something like that, it gives you that slack.
Yeah, and also I think it's about realizing that like I used to be very like purist in the sense of like, well, this is my idea and I really want it to be this way. But the more you work, the more you realize like it really is such a benefit to have so many smart people around you to help you iterate that idea. And like you have to be open to iteration and you have to be open to the fact that like whatever your idea is, it's the end of it's not probably not going to look exactly like that. Still inspired by your idea, but just be open to like all those things, like even with brands, sometimes I can feel myself getting a bit like, but I really want the event to be like this or whatever. And it's like, but that's okay. Like I have so many people around me that are experts in different things and I can be open to if it's not exactly that bullet point that I had in my Notion, like that's also okay. Like we're all here to collaborate and work together and like just get to that goal, which is just to tell the story and hopefully it resonates and hopefully, we're the best platform for you. But it's there's many different ways to get there and I'm not the only brain there, right? So
I love that. I believe Rick Rubin in his book, The Creative Act, talks about how it's actually very egotistical or pompous to have that finished goal when you start, because then essentially you're keeping out all other influences that could make that end thing better. And I think that for me was a huge unlock of like, yeah, how am I so smart that I know what the end should be, rather than I have an idea, I have an insight, I have a spark, and like let's just throw some stuff on the fire and allow others to come to that fire and throw their stuff on it, and then by the end we have a way bigger raging fire that's keeping us all warm, versus if I just like, no, don't put that there, it's my idea, like I need to make it like, yeah, no, I love that. I think control and power, like getting stuff done, are opposites, where the more control we have, sometimes the less outcome power that we actually, it's like a false thing where if we lean into power, we let go of control and we actually realize, wow, through that we actually created something far better than ever could imagined ourselves. And it's a freeing for me to kind of realize how selfless creation is, versus sometimes when you first start, you're like, because you start creating by yourself, it's a very selfish or solo thing. But man, there's something so fun with creating with people, with teams, interviews like this, because I have no clue where you're going to take it, and I really enjoy where we've taken it so far. So
no,
no, I love that.
100%. And I think that that is a really big facet of marketing as well, is like it's not there should be no ego in marketing. Like if you are going into marketing with an ego, like that you're already on the wrong foot, my friend. Like marketing is not about you, right? Like so and if you think that, you're already in the wrong place if you ask me because um yeah, it's about the story and it's about how many people can benefit from this product or software or whatever and so you need to remove the ego from it completely and that's not just like whenever I get asked in interviews like for jobs like what do you like about a job place or whatever and I'm like I cannot work in a environment where there's ego. Like first of all, it's just so childish to me to be like, "Well, that's my toy." Like, shut up. But also, like, at the same time, like, it's just not how good work happens. Good work does not come out of people being in teams with egos. Like, you just can't.
Well, that I think Shivani puts a perfect bow on kind of the stories and how the best stories are told with others. Are you ready to get to the life portion of this interview?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer for this, but yeah, I'll
It's a
try.
super easy question. It's super easy. So, Shivani, what for you, so not answering for all humans, but just for you, what is the job that you're hiring life for? Or at the end of life, how do you say that was a life well lived?
I think for me, I've the older I get, I've been in so many different communities. I've had so many different jobs. I've had so many different like identities or whatever, if you want to call it. I think that the purpose of life is to live in community. I think that we don't choose to be born. We just are. And then we are brought here and it's kind of like, well, figure it out. And we live in communities where we depend on each other. And and we have to realize how much, not only just because it's the right thing to do to be there for each other, but also because we literally depend on each other. Like, try my very best to reject individualism a lot in my life. I think that like we truly live in communities where we all depend on each other so much. We all play different parts. We cannot survive without each other. And kindness has to be at the root of everything. If it's not, there's just no, if there's no root, there's no tree. So it has to be there. And so for me, that is how I go through life and how I'm trying to live my life as much as I can now. That like I think that it's all about, you don't have to necessarily build your own community, but you're already in one, when you're born. So what can you do to just be the best part of that community and like truly live in community, like not live for yourself, but really just live in community.
There was a pastor who talked about how historically in the past people would heal through community. You would have someone within your community, you'd heal together, where now if you think of therapy and all of these things, it's healing isolated, it's healing individually, and then you go back to the community with your healed self. And this person was just trying to just look at that maybe critically of like, is that the right way to heal, or is that an illusion that we only can heal in community because like community has someone that I don't like, but I put up with them, and that grows something within me where if I just go to a cave somewhere and become a monk, which is needed, good, but like then you're not rubbing against people in the community who have a different view or whatever. But maybe, which could be fun, Shivani, I'd love for us to, because I actually was talking to someone this morning about this individualism kind of collective approach. When could you maybe, like, this might be very hard for you, but like how could we steel man that the individualism is like right? Is there moments in people's lives where you need to take more of an individualistic approach or own that, where maybe collective is always the goal and we want to come back to that, but could you steel man when individualism maybe is the right option for someone? Or do you never believe that we should be trying to like individually lead our lives and it should always be for the collective, that we want to do stuff to help all of us?
I think I'm trying to figure that out, but I do think there is place for both. Like I think therapy is extremely important, and it has helped me a great deal. But I also think the point of it should be so that you're a better person to exist in your community. Um, so I think they play off each other, and I think like, for example, if you look at like a lot of indigenous communities, like they do a lot of healing in community, which I think makes a lot of sense. And to your point, it's exactly what you're saying, right? Like you heal so much by being in relationships and seeing how you work with other people, and how you live with other people, and putting what you put up with and what parts of your brain you're activating when you're resisting or when you're being really welcoming and all those things. But there is a lot of individual work you have to do as well, right? Like I've only been in 3 real relationships in my life, and I married the last person, who's my husband. I think that I had to do a lot of work on myself before I could be a really good partner for him. And I think that I learned so much from the relationships that I was in before, but I also learned a lot from when I was on my own and not in a relationship. And that showed me how I show up in a relationship. And I do think that there are parts of yourself that you should be okay with, and that you can only figure out on your own, before you can then express like how you should be with other people and how to be with other people. And uh yeah, I just really think that there is a place for both of those things, but the ultimate goal should be like how you show up in that community, and like to be better for that community, because again, like we don't live in isolation. So to me it's like that's the constant variable, is that when you wake up every day, no matter what you do, you are probably interacting with another person. So I do believe that like we owe people, to a certain extent, do owe people some kindness. Like, and we don't know what people are going through. And I think you could argue there for certain things, but between like women and men and things like that. And I don't believe that women owe men like a crazy amount of kindness. But I do believe that like, I just mean from like trying to be a good person in terms of like just showing up with like giving people the benefit of the doubt and things like that.
No, I love your point that nobody operates outside a community. Even a family would be
Yeah.
arguing, like a community and argue. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I really enjoy your point, and I'm trying none of the parables or stories in my head went to it, but it's like I feel like there has to be this hero's journey where there is this, like, you're in a community, but you need to go out on your own. You need to have some of these dark nights of the soul, as Eckhart Tolle would say, of like, I just don't know how this is all going to make sense, and I don't feel like there's someone supporting me in the dark night of the soul. Essence is like, I feel like God's left to me, but like you build stuff in that dark night, so then when the morning comes, and it feels like, to your point, there's almost like this balance beam of like you're individually healing or doing things, and you come back to the community and you get some healing, but you're also able to serve and be of use. You go to the individual, like it's almost like you're never living in one. You shouldn't live in
Yeah.
one, maybe is the thought. So I really liked how you broke that down.
Thanks.
What is something, Shivani, in your life that, and you can take this anywhere, so kind of open playing field, but like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you believed X, you believed Y, and today, maybe you haven't like gone 180 on that belief, but you just believe something slightly different. What is that belief for you, and what maybe caused that shift in perspective?
I think this is so hard because it's like such a nuanced thing, but I have a poli-sci degree. So it's very hard for me to not think of things on a systems level. I'm always thinking of how are things existing in the system, right? And so like it's very hard for me to think of things as like isolated. So in that sense, it's very hard for me to think of an individual and an individual's choices and an individual's decisions and whatever to be the sole reason for why they're in the position they're in their life. And I still believe that. I still believe that for some people, because of the way our world is built, no matter what you do, upward social mobility will be difficult for you. And sometimes you cannot wish your way, dream your way, manifest your way out of that. However, something that's changed for me in the last few years because of my own experience, and again, this is obviously anecdotal, not on a systems level type of thing. Like, obviously I used to be in academics a lot, so I really do believe that like in order to make a sound point, you have to have like show a pattern over time. So I just want to preface like this is my anecdote. But like I never thought that I would work in tech. You know what I mean? Like I have a poli-sci degree and a French degree. I was a journalist for a few years. I was a model for 10 years. Like if you were to tell me 5 years ago you would be, in a senior position at a tech company or whatever, I'd be like, no, I'm not. Like that is just like not possible for me. How the hell would I enter tech? But so that has made me think, while I do believe in like, Maslow's hierarchy type of thing, you do have to have certain needs met. And I don't believe that you should ever have to struggle to survive. I do believe that now that sometimes you do have to just be a little bit bold and things will happen. So like, I just didn't think I would get any of those tech jobs, but I was like, screw it. I'm just going to apply anyways. I don't care. What's the worst that can happen? I don't get in. Okay, whatever. Then I just won't get the job. But the best thing that could happen is then I'm in and I build a tech career, which is what happened. But like if I kept thinking to myself, you have no tech experience, you were a model for 10 years, you were a journalist, you have a poli-sci degree, none of this has anything to do with marketing or tech, like I would have held myself back. So I think I'm now starting to think that again, I think that I'm starting to understand that it is more of a balance of that. I do think that there are so many systems that are working against us constantly, but I think now I'm starting to believe more that there is more power in your daily decisions. There is more power in your choices. When you get to a certain point, I totally believe that. Again, that is not to say that I don't think that the systems barriers are there because they fully are. But like, I guess I've just started to believe a bit more that like I have a little more control than I thought I had, and that like my decisions and everyone's decisions, I think, hold just a little bit more weight than maybe we like to give them credit for.
So would you say your locus of control, like you're feeling that I can control where things are going, or I have like a say, that increased, that if I say yes to things or if I kind of step into stuff can happen, while there's still acknowledging and trying to remove systems barriers that do keep people, to your point? Because yeah, while Maslow or some of that history of him, and I don't know if it's the Nazis or whatever, is interesting, I do think the underlying does hold true of like, if you're hungry, or if you think about like raising children's readings levels and they're hungry and stuff, you can't just do more tutoring, like you need to then be
Right.
like, oh crap, they're not
You
getting,
need to eat. Yeah.
they're malnourished, and like who can study when
100%.
they're hungry. So I love that. And I think like invert thinking is something I do a lot. So I go to like kind of polls. And I think if you had to pick a poll of I control my life and I can make decisions that make progress or whatever, or I'm completely out of control and things are happening to me, I think it's always better to take that side of the polls of like I can do something that can change my life. Because I think there was a study done with rats where if they hit a lever, it would sometimes zap them or not zap them. And eventually, with the unpredictableness of that, the locus of control being removed, they just go to the middle and lie there and die because no one wants to live in an unpredictable world that I can't, if I eat healthy, I get fat. And it's like, well, then I'm just going to die because like I'm doing the right thing. But there is some leeway of like, if you do eat healthy, you should have some positive benefits. So we do hold some power. So I really love that. And I've had my own fluctuations in how much power manifesting, just all of that where you kind of grow. And maybe that's an age thing or like you keep growing in your ideas around it as things happen, as you send off resumes and they land and you're like, wow, I need to listen more to intuition in the universe or that. And I love that.
Yeah, and I think part of it is like we are very conditioned to like stay away from failure and think that failure sucks and I don't want to get a rejection. And so if there's like this much of a chance that I get a rejection, I'm just not going to do it. Whereas I like to say I would like to get as many rejections as possible. I would love to go through life saying I tried so many different things and I was rejected so many times, but also I was accepted so many times. So many times I didn't think that I would be. And like look at all these crazy cool experiences that I had. And also failure is nothing but feedback, right? Failure is feedback. That's it. Like you are, nothing is a waste if everything is an experience and you have to go through life that way. You just have to go through life that way. And so that's why I like to make a lot of content about failure as well, because I really want us to like flip it on its head and not be so afraid of it and just see it as always a learning experience. And I also think that will help us connect with each other better because then we're not judging people so much. Like, we're not saying, well, you failed at this, so you XYZ, or you got a rejection, so that must mean XYZ. It doesn't mean it just means you learned. It just means that person had an experience. And so, I think that is often something that can hold us back a lot. And that's also, I was so, so afraid of rejection. Like, but then once you're a model and then you're a journalist and all there is rejection for so much of your life, you're like, oh, actually, this is just like a part of it,
It's not
And
bad.
no, and you just learn
Yeah.
every time. And like, if something isn't for you, it's not for you, and that's fine. 'Cause something else will be.
I like that failure is feedback. I think I've heard it framed like you either win or you learn. So similar concept. But I do think there's a evolutionary reason for why we hate rejection. Because if you think of the tribe, rejection from the tribe wasn't just like a lack of dopamine or people are laughing at you. It's a death, quote unquote, because you're outside of the village and now no one wants you and you have. So I think that has always been something interesting to me of like it's built into us to conform, to be part of the group, to fill in that consensus verse leaning into rejection without realizing like, wait, it's not 40 AD anymore, it's 2025 and a rejection on X makes me feel like I'm going to get kicked out of the village, but like there is no longer that and like I can live. And like, so I think there's some of those thoughts that I've worked through of like, that's why rather than vilifying myself, of like, geez, you're so weak that you can't deal with failure. It's like, no, DNA wise, failure is or rejection is the worst thing because that led to death. You have on social, as you talked about, you do it well. I think you call it the Museum of Failures, which is kind of funny because you're building a museum of failures as you're also building a museum of success. They go hand in hand. But talk to me on how you got to that, why you share your failures. You talked a little bit like lowering the stigma or trying to make, but I also think you do it well. And there's another side of sharing failures with then like a huge triumph at the end where it just feels like, this isn't a failure. Like
Yeah,
it's a slam dunk. Like let us see a missed
exactly.
layup. Talk to me on how you got to Museum of Failures and like what your goal and hope is with that content series.
Great question. So I started that because I saw a trend called Museum of Failures before on Instagram. All it was exactly what my very first post was, which was somebody just, whatever, small 8-second video, but like the failures all around them and saying, like, this is what I've learned in life. And so I was like, let me just extract that even further and actually dive into every single failure. The reason I do that is because I really believe that the power in the way you shift culture is by being vulnerable, because we're so afraid to be vulnerable. We're so afraid to always show everybody all the sides of us or be super honest or whatever. I really believe that type of radical honesty and that type of like vulnerability is how we're going to shift culture, because that is how we understand each other. If we don't let people in, if we always have these walls up, you're not I don't like the word authentic, like in the sense of, because we've like thrown that around so much, but you're just not truly being who you are. You're not being authentic. How can people connect with you if who the thing that they're connecting with like isn't even real, right? Like how can you do that? And like, not to bring it back to marketing, but that's what marketing is too, right? Like it's like you're creating connections, right? That's why I decided to lean into it more. I also didn't see anybody doing it, and I was like I said, I don't really like to have I try my best. I'm a human, but I try my best not to have an ego. I try my best to just be genuine and go into things. And I know that I'm not the best at everything. And I know that I'm learning as I go. So why wouldn't I just share like what I think I failed at and what I failed at, and like what have I learned from it, and get a little bit vulnerable so that I can connect with people more, so that hopefully it helps people understand me more and I can understand them more, and that hopefully it makes the biggest thing is just it makes other people feel like their failures are not really failures. And like that we can study it. And when I was looking at this concept, I found that I think it was like MIT or something that they have, I don't know if it's called Fail Lab or something like that, but they have a whole project that these like psychology or sociology students were doing, that was all about studying failure and just like talking about how people come out of it and what you've learned from it and blah, blah, blah. And so it's just like pivots in your life, and I feel like I like to be the type of creator that just shows that like I think that I'm just like learning as I go about everything, about life, about work, like everything. And that's how I like to share across all of my platforms. I'm just learning as I go, and like we don't have to pretend like we all have it together all the time, because like we really don't. Like most of us don't, right? And that's how I want to connect with people, That's the type of community I want to build. We're all there for each other, figuring it out at the same time. And so that's kind of like my ethos behind it, and why I wanted to create that series.
No, I love that. And something that came to my mind as you're talking about that is to kind of not lean into our rejections, failures, or to kind of not address them, I think, is to deny ourselves. I think like we are not fully accepting ourselves because we are both the successes and the failures, where the positive and the negatives, I think everyone is a contradiction. We contain multitudes. So I really think that you're onto something. And sadly, there has to be 1 to 2 people that kind of take that baton and lead that way. In a whole different way, I try to approach my content on marketing much more like a journalist, where it's never about me or my thoughts. It's about this person and maybe my ideas around it. So I think that isn't revolutionary, and that's not in the domain that you're working in, where it allows people to share and be vulnerable, but it's this place of like, no one's doing it, I'll be the first to take that step in my world. So similarly to you see it on Instagram, but not maybe in your LinkedIn sphere. So you're like, let's bring it to LinkedIn, which I think is a really great play of like a marketing tactic, is like go to other platforms, because LinkedIn's always a few days behind on the trends and stuff. So I love that. Shivani, I could probably talk to you forever, so I need to ask you one final question so that we can close out this awesome conversation. There's this movie called Inception, whether you saw it or not.
I did.
I'll give a quick synopsis, but essentially these groups of people go into people's dreams and incept more malicious ideas. I'm going to sell my company. I'm going to give this person a stake. And then tomorrow they wake up with that idea being theirs, but it was really incepted, planted in their minds. We're going to go on a benevolent angle for it, is you get to go in the minds of every person on the planet and incept an idea. So then tomorrow we wake up and the idea you incept is our idea, and we live out of that idea. So then likely the world will be different as we all live out of that idea. What is the idea you incept into the minds of every human?
My idea would be like, how can I root myself in kindness so that I am a better member of my community? Like that would be my thing. I really think that like kindness is at the root of everything, and kindness is connected to community. And so yeah, that would be the idea that I would want to put in everyone's mind, I think.
Yeah, that would be a world that I would love to wake up to. Well, thank you so much, Shivani, for coming on, sharing your insights and your humanity. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post it on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.